everybody, welcome to Grimsforge Gaming. Today we're going to be covering my Tony Stark Iron Man. This is PVE build, and then I'll tell you what changes you can make to make it a PvP build. It's a pretty simple setup. We are running a front bar, back bar with a mythic and a two-piece monster set for this. As far as Infinite Archive goes, I got to 8-3 a couple days ago, maybe last week, with a buddy of mine, Crocs. So 8-3 is pretty good for Infinite Archive on this build, and you can see that gameplay in my live streams. So let's jump in. First things first, we are running Death Dealers. Death Dealers gains a persistent stack of Escalating Fate every 2 seconds you are in combat, up to 30 stacks. Each stack of Escalating Fate increases your maximum stamina, health, and magicka by 88. You lose stacks when you're out of combat, so as long as we're not standing around doing a lot of selling and things between, you won't lose those stacks. But getting your max health up as high as you can in the 40 to 50k is recommended to get into the higher arcs, and even then you're going to get hit one shot by things. Now, if you don't have the leads from Death Dealers, because a lot of people are having a hard time getting one particular lead for this, you can run Pale Order, and you'll have a lot of healing coming in with Pale Order, so it's not a bad second option, or even a first option, whatever, you do you. Okay? First set that we're running on our front bar is going to be the Etheric Lancer set, and the 2-piece on its weapon and spell damage, 3 pieces crit, 4 pieces weapon and spell damage, 5 piece dealing damage with burning light twice within 30 seconds, creates a 5-meter area for 5 seconds. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. That pretty much happens on cooldown too. The way this works, you're going to have this Lancer every 6 seconds. While in the area, dealing damage with an Adric Spear ability, which happens to be our puncturing sweeps, launches a spear at the target, dealing unbuffed 7,400 magic damage and applying Sundered, and increasing your weapon and spell damage by 300 for 6 seconds. So, if you look at that, this has a 6-second cooldown, but the weapon and spell damage stays on you for 6 seconds, so you can pretty much keep the weapon and spell damage up as long as your burning light's doing damage. Like, as long as you're puncturing, sweeping, or biting, jabbing, you're going to have that going. The damage output for this, that's very bursty, that's great. It seems to be working out really well. So as far as damage sets go on Templars, I'm a big fan of this set right now. That's our front bar set. The back bar set that we're running is Serpent's Disdain, and that's because we're running the Elemental Explosion on our back bar, and we have the Assassin's Misery attached to it. So when we switch to our back bar and we're putting all those status effects, it increases all the status effects from 4 seconds to 16 seconds, or a total of 20 seconds. So when you start getting into arcs 3, 4, and above, and the mobs have 500k health plus, this thing starts to pay dividends. Okay, Serpent's Disdain. Also, Serpent's Disdain is a craftable set. So let's say you're just now jumping into Infinite Archive and you want to start farming the sets and you don't have all this. Instead, run Deadly Strikes on your front bar. Deadly Strikes is going to give you 15% more damage to your puncturing sweeps or biting jabs, plus 15% more to your execute. So you can't really go wrong with that. I can tell you that this seems to be more burst and more everything. And I like this more than Deadly. That's another thing you could do from a PvP standpoint. You might be able to pair this with Deadly and you might have something there. But for later arcs, we really like getting all the big explosions and damage status effects on things. And you'll see some really high crazy numbers. You'll hit 200 to 400k DPS on group pulls with only a couple focused efforts in your kit. So okay, we are running a 2-piece Scoria, and Scoria unbuffed right now deals you have an 8% chance to deal like a 6-7k meteor, flame meteor that drops out of the sky, and then it also does flame damage. This kind of suits Tony Stark's armor set, the Mach 50 or whatever, Mark 50 is armor set, which is like the nanotech armor, and he's got a lot of different weapons. Like this thing's animation's pretty cool. You have like a lancer that shows up over your shoulder, which is very like nanotech armor, and then this is just dropping meteors on people's head like acorns, and so that's pretty funny. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4 heavy, 1, 2, 3, 4 heavy, 1 light, and 1 medium. So let's double check this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium, 5, 1, 1. Okay. And we are infused weapon and spell damage, infused weapon and spell damage, and infused weapon and spell damage on these. Okay. We have some hidden recoveries too when you jump in and you look at this, but so we got 1800 mag recovery plus another 400 plus from our defensive rune, 1400 stam recovery. Our health recovery is not bad. Our weapon and spell damage buffs up much higher than this. You can see it getting in the 6 to 7k range, and if you had some outside sources you might even hit 8k on it. And then our resistances here, on our front bar are going to be at cap, and then on our back bar we're at 30k. So our resistances are pretty nice, and I don't know, I really like this build. If it's been working out really well in Infinite Archive. Oh, let's show you that animation here real quick. There's the animation. You can see the thing drops on the ground, and we're just going to pick it up, and you can see our spell damage spiked up to 5,500, 6,300 right there, and that's pretty good. I like where this thing sits at. We can really spike up to pretty high. Couple things. We're running sword and board initially on my front bar. I was running sword and board. It's thematic. There's a Tony Stark or Iron Man where he's got a massive shield, and probably the fight where he's fighting Thanos, and so his nanotech armor summons a shield. So I was thinking along those lines. I have run dual wield. I just need to level dual wield on this Tony Stark. This is a newer Tony Stark for me. I'd need to level dual wield, but I went to sword and board because I thought, you know what, those later arcs things really thump you hard, so let's use spell wall. But even with spell wall active, they were just clobbering you through it. So like they were still hitting you, and this is supposed to block all incoming, automatically block all attacks. It wasn't automatically blocking all attacks. I was getting hit for 50 and 60k with this thing up. So sword and board might not be the play. You might end up getting more pin going dual wield and more damage output going dual wield. I just need to level my dual wielding up more, and we'll probably make that change. So yeah. A couple other things for the later arcs. Our Radiant Ward is almost a must. We need the really big shields to help mitigate some of the damage. Even while bracing or holding block, I can hit my Radiant Ward and hold block and mitigate 70% of damage coming in, and the thing will almost chunk me for all my shield and half my health. And at that time, if I'm at like 40k health, that's a 30k hit that I just took, and that's mitigating 70% of the damage. So the damage is very, very high later levels. Okay, so Radiant Ward was a must. You could, I like where we're at balance wise, but if you wanted to get rid of Radiant Ward, this gets much bigger shield. You can see that nearby enemies take some magic damage, and each enemy hit increases the shield strength by 20%. Excuse me. So the play is to pull everyone into an area. So I have a bunch of mobs in an area and then hit this shield. So that way I get that massive shield to kind of allow me to just go into full offense on this bar. Okay. Yeah. As far as buffs go, I have my Sundering Soul set up. This does physical damage. I didn't want this to be a Magicka pull. I wanted it to be a Stamina pull. And this has the class mastery glyph on it, so I get additional armor and some weapon and spell damage from it. And as long as my defensive rune is going when I cast that, you know, it ends up being more armor and more weapon and spell damage, so we can hit that 7k real easily on this build. And then the final third line is Major Breach. So for my single target, applying Major Breach to them, like boss burns and stuff like that. So again, let's look at this here real quick before we jump into the abilities, though I'm getting ahead of myself. We're running Reinforced on this. We're running Divines, Infused, Divines, Reinforced, and Sturdy. Just kind of a little bit of a hodgepodge. If you want to stick to mostly Divines, that's fine. Infused on all of these. We're running Infused on this. I could probably switch that to Sharpened. We'll have to look at it and see. And the dual wield, like when I switch over to dual wield, like I was telling you, I will probably make the sword Nirnhoned and a mace will be sharpened, and so we'll get the best of both worlds. Swords increase your weapon and spell damage, and with it being Nirnhoned, we'll get the most out of that. And with it a mace or maul, whatever, mace sharpened, will get additional pen. So that'll be the play if I switch off of the sword and board and go dual wield. And then on the back, it's important to do, right now I'm doing Inferno Staff. You could play around with Lightning Staff. The difference between the two is this: Inferno Staff is going to buff your dot damage, which all of those status effects that we're putting on the targets, and then we're increasing the duration to like a total of 20 seconds. I'm buffing all of the status effects and dot damage that we put on things by running an Inferno Staff, which is a lot. If you wanted to buff your puncturing sweeps or biting jabs, you would run a Lightning Staff if you wanted to run Lightning Staff on your front bar and then say Frost Staff on your back bar or whatever. But this is the play right now for me. But anyways, depending on what you want to buff, it's going to be Lightning Staff or Inferno Staff, okay? Or if you need the mitigations on your back bar and you're running dual wield on your front, you can run Frost Staff on your back and be doing the blocking and stuff on your back bar. But honestly, I almost recommend that trying to dodge roll and play with speed for the later levels in Infinite Archives the play, because if you're going to try and shield and block through things, some things are just going to clobber you right through it. And honestly, where performance is at, you're going to dodge roll and still get hit with some things that you're like, I dodge rolled that, and the game says no you didn't, so whatever. Okay, now let's talk back bar setups for PvP real quickly. Obviously, Serpent's Disdain, you could try and run a status effect situation for PvP. This build, exactly how it is, might be a real handful and put a lot of dots, and if you're trying to farm damage in Battlegrounds, this might be a really good setup. I just haven't played around with it, but I did play around with the Essence Thief setup on the back bar, and basically I would do a heavy attack into a degeneration to get my spell damage, or a degeneration into a heavy attack. And what would happen is the Essence Thief sigil would be right next to my target. Then I would gap close to the target and start sweeping, and then I would have two sigils to pick up. I have the Essence Thief sigil to pick up to get the 10% damage bonus, and I would also have the Lancer sigil to pick up to do all that extra damage. But it's a very aggressive and very bursty, a lot of extra damage setup. So Essence Thief back bar, Lancer front bar was a nice setup. Like I said, if you don't have Lancer and it's very bursty, I like it, you could run Deadly front bar. So Essence Thief Deadly, which is a typical front bar back bar setup for a lot of different classes. So let's look at these abilities here. Explosive Charge right now. Charge your Divine Lance to impale all enemies in an area. Deals splash magic damage and you gain major protection. And then any enemy hit while casting is interrupted. That interruption is very important, especially if you have fables that are casting or getting ready to cast things, you could just simply gap close to them and stop that. Okay, we're running Puncturing Sweep and unbuffed. You can see what the damage on this is, and then movement speed wise, it applies a snare or slow to enemies and heals me. And then Sundering Soul, we already talked about it. This is a stamina dump for me. This is important that you set it up as physical damage or bleed damage if you can, or just poison damage I think is fine too. Just make sure it's pulling from your stamina field, otherwise you'll have too many magicka required abilities. And I like the class mastery glyph on this, that you can't argue with extra armor and weapon and spell damage, and you also can't argue with major breach. Another thing you could do if you don't have the class mastery, you could do the lingering or damage over time effect. And the lingering or damage over time, this is not, we're not using this as a spammable. I'm just hitting a target with it once to apply major breach for the next 10 seconds. So you'll at least get 10 seconds of dot pressure or dot damage. The only problem is the lingering, the second line of it. Anything that's lingering within the scribing usually doesn't have a massive tooltip. It's a fairly low dot pressure tooltip. Okay, so there that is. We are running the Radiant Ward option just for that. Any enemy hit increases the shield strength by 20%. Currently, I can tell you this on the PTS, I've got people that are looking into this, but this shield, Templar shields, are broken on the PTS and not functioning. They're not very big at all. They did something to it and it's not working properly, so I might have to drop this if they don't figure that out and it goes live, which it most likely will, so whatever. And what we'll do is we'll pull from another, we'll end up running Bone Shield in place of it, which will be a stamina pull instead of a mag pull. The only problem is Bone Shield does not get the tooltip, that extra 20% per enemy hit. Bone Shield's not going to get as large as the Radiant Ward will, but we're gonna make do with what we got. We've got Radiant Glory, it's the execute, and it's pretty nice. It heals you while you're executing, which is pretty important considering you're stuck in a channel. I was running the Sword and Board ult here. We just recently added Dawnbreaker Smiting on here for some AoE and some dot pressure, and then also I need to pick up these passives. We just are really low on Sky Shards, only 70 Sky Shards on this version of Tony Stark that we made and re-rolled and leveled up and stuff. So I need to get this, and also we are missing all of our light armor from that one light armor, so our stats would look even better once we pick all those up. But you can't really argue with the results. 8-3, 8-4 in Infinite Archive is not too shabby. Okay, that's our front bar. Back bar, Degeneration. This is our major sorcery, major brutality, fiery explosion. This is very important that you set this up like this. The flame staff adds into your dot damage, okay, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm adding into my dot damage. That burning, chilled, and concussed is going to tick harder. This is going to tick harder, and this has a dot damage component, so everything on our back bar is going to hit harder because we're using a flame staff. If I wanted the explosion part of this, the flame damage, the first line of this to hit harder, I would actually run a lightning staff, which increases your direct damage attacks and channeled attacks, and I would get a bigger tooltip on the front end, but not so much on the status effects. This is my leash, or my pull, pulls everything together. It also, applies the Assassin's Misery or whatever, or the Execute, and it burns a bunch of soul gems and puts a dot on things. And the Soul Burst version of that Execute can get up to 2.8% of the creature's maximum health, so the dot is pretty significant. We're running Honor the Dead. The only reason we're running Honor the Dead here is I could have probably put a burst heal on Ulfseel's contingency, but we're running Soul Burst here, Ulfseel's, and I could have attached some things, and maybe that's the play. But this is an immediate burst heal for me, so can't really argue with that. And channeled focus, you can see that this will give me an extra 480 for mag recovery every 2 seconds, and so that's pretty nice. And when we're staying in the room, we have a little bit of extra healing coming in, so that's good. And our back bar is solar prism, and the synergy on this is really nice. So if you're running with somebody and they can activate the synergy, this is the play. If you're not running with somebody and you can't activate the synergy, then maybe run something else like Meteor or whatever. And eventually, I can already tell you right now, I am going to get Soul Strike. It's very Iron Man. My first iteration of Iron Man that I made 3 years ago or whatever, I had this for him, and you know, audio wise, whenever he would initiate that, I would do the pulsar sound, and it was really cool. This thing has been buffed since then, so it almost acts as the pulsar, and I could run a 2-beam setup on and just absolutely melt people, and so that might be the play. So but eventually this is going to be the play, and it might end up being, this is it's a damage over time, so our flame staff would buff it, so I could put this on my back bar right there and it'd be very, very powerful. Okay, let's jump into our CP here. Green Tree, we're running Steed's Blessing for the extra 20% movement speed. We're running Rationer because I use the expensive foods and we need them to last longer. War Mount and Gifted Rider because we were out in Cyrodiil and it's a mount simulator. On the blue tree, we're running Untamed Aggression for an extra 150 weapon and spell damage, Wrathful Strikes for 205 weapon and spell damage, Thaumaturge to once again double down on our dot damage and increase it by 6%, and then Reaving Blows, when you deal direct damage, you heal for 7% of the damage done. So our Puncturing Sweeps is considered direct damage, and it's also a channeled effect. Our Puncturing Sweeps are healing them through the actual ability, but we're also getting healed an extra 7% on top of that while spamming Puncturing Sweeps, and so that's pretty nice. The front component of Elemental Explosion, we are healed, so when we pull everything into a group and then drop that big bomb on people, we're healed for 7% of that, and so that's pretty nice. Don't forget to go into here. There's an extra 100 weapon and spell damage hidden on both sides of those. Okay. Okay. Rejuvenation for 90% or 90 extra health, magicka and stamina recovery. Fortified for more armor. Boundless vitality for more health, and then Thrill of the Hunt. I don't currently have Race Against Time on my bar for speed. I'm kind of moving around quickly from target using my gap closer, but this gives me access to Major Expedition after every individual kill for 6 seconds. Well, when you're clearing rooms of mobs, you have Major Expedition virtually going at all times, so I didn't need Race Against Time. So Thrill of the Hunt was really nice in Infinite Archive. So okay, and that is the CP for him. Let's jump in, look at one other thing. I'm pretty sure my food is run out, so let's pop another one of those. And you can see that we are a Nord Templar, and we're running the Atronach Mundustone with some Divines traits, so that's an extra 400 mag recovery right there. And we're running Smoke Bear Haunch for the extra health and recoveries, so that works out really well. Let's go down, and we're going to jump into the armor sets here. Oh, helm-wise, let's look at this here real quick. I don't have a lot of options for helm for Iron Man, and so right now we're running this, and I ran that back in the day on it. It's kind of this retro or new modern Iron Man. There's just not a lot of options. The closest one that has like the Iron Man front look also has a hood over it, and I just wasn't feeling the hood over it. So, but right now I've been running just Iron Man. It's Tony Stark, so I'm running my Iron Man with just his helm off, and I thought we didn't do a bad job on the younger Tony Stark. This looks a lot like him, I felt. So Let's jump in and look at the armor sets here. That helm is called the Ebon Shadow helm, and the color on it is called Ruby Throne Red. The shoulders are Ebon Shadow epaulets, and Fire Drake Flame was the red on it. We're running the Shardborn gauntlets, and we're running the Zifkin Greaves. We're running the Arthizand armor, and this armor set's got that glowing thing right in the middle, which reminded me a lot of Iron Man. So there are some other Iron Man armor sets. I had a friend that sent me their Iron Man setup, and it looked really nice too. This could probably be a little higher up on the chest, more around Tony Stark's heart, but whatever. I liked this armor set. I thought it looked very Iron Man. High Elf girdle, and then we're running the Balfarian Sentinel boots, and I was running a different boot. I don't remember what it was. We're running the Gloombound weapons, so that way when he's walking around, he doesn't have weapons on him. He's just got his pulsars and stuff like that, and we're running Gloombound on the back bar. Okay. As far as abilities for PvP, you could try this setup with this armor set, but I would switch out this for PvP, and I would probably run this right here. I would run Backlash and then morph it to Power of the Light, and that would probably fit in right there. So you could apply Major Breach and do a little splash or upfront damage on him. Gap close to apply Major Breach because this is range, then gap close to him, stun them, and then start sweeping into them, and then you have the execute while your Power of the Light. This ability would be right here, and then on your back bar you could drop either one of these, and you could run Total Dark, which is gonna do a lot of healing when you're taking direct damage, and so those two abilities would be the abilities that I'd end up working in here somehow. So you could make an argument for Radial Sweep and then whichever Crescent Sweep for your front bar setup. You can't go wrong with Dawnbreaker, and then like I said, for my Iron Man I am going to be going with this. So I'll basically just double beam them. I will hit my Sundering Soul from range on them, and then gap close stun them, and then start puncturing sweeping them, and while Power of the Light's going, and as soon as Power of the Light's about to pop, I will start hitting this ult and then go right to my execute, and that'll be like my front bar setup. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. Yeah, Tony Stark, Iron Man. Have a good day. Bye.